Hey there, folks. Welcome to another edition of Stranger in a Southern Land. I, of course, am your host, Jake Manning. Today on the program, I speak with LeeAnn Shattuck, the car chick LeeAnn Shattuck, a nickname that's followed her around most of her life because she's always been interested in cars of all shapes and sizes, driving them, working on them, researching them, all kinds of stuff. And she was always under the impression that she would need a good, high-paying job to pay for her car hobby, her automobile hobby. But then one day she found herself in the driver's seat and realized that she can make her hobby her profession. You know, this is really kind of the ideal, the dream situation that we're all looking for. And this conversation is just so full of positive energy and just nuggets of knowledge, you know, and just I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you guys today. So I just really want to get to it as quickly as possible. But I do want to thank everyone over at the Shining Wizards Podcast Network. Thank you very much for getting this podcast out to as many people as possible. Thank you for making the Cool Kids Table a little bit larger. I thank you for that. And make sure you check them out and all the other podcasts that they have at shiningwizardsnetwork.com. Also, too, don't forget to check out Don, my producer, and all the other podcasts that he produces at dsct.tv. Can't thank Don enough for all the hard work that he does. And I can't thank you guys enough for showing up to all the live events that are going on. You guys have really been showing up to these shows, so I can't thank you enough. So I want to make sure that I keep giving you some dates. I got a lot of cool stuff coming up here in June and a lot of, relations to the podcast guests, as we'll see as I'm announcing these dates. Most specifically, Saturday, June the 4th, Northeast Wrestling makes its North Carolina debut in Hickory, North Carolina, at the ballpark where the Hickory Crawdads play. If you watch the video portion of the podcast that I conduct with Aaron Cox, where we talk about the Hickory Crawdads, you can see the baseball diamond in the background. Well, guess what? I will be wrestling on that baseball diamond Saturday, June the 4th for Northeast Wrestling. Make sure you log on to northeastwrestling.com for tickets about that show. I mean, Ric Flair is going to be there. The Hardy Boys are going to be there. It's going to be an awesome event. So make sure you log on to northeastwrestling.com. Now, Friday, June the 10th, I make it all the way back to Clive, Iowa. I'm going back to Iowa to wrestle. It's been a very long time since I've done so. It's been a couple years, but Sami Callihan, former Stranger in a Southern Land guest Sami Callihan, is putting on a show in Clive, Iowa, and it's a star-studded event. I forget all the names that are on there, and I think it's ProWrestlingRevolver.com. More information on that, if you just follow me on Twitter, I'll probably be tweeting out a poster of that sometime soon, but I'm pretty sure it's ProWrestlingRevolver.com. I know Billy Gunn's going to be there, Scotty Too Hottie, and just all kinds of names. There's a lot more names than just that is for sure. So I highly recommend that you're in Clive, Iowa on Friday, June the 10th for Pro Wrestling Revolver. Now on Monday, June the 13th, I will be emceeing for Pete Davidson at the Comedy Zone in Charlotte. For tickets about that show, make sure you log on to cltcomedyzone.com. Then on Wednesday, June the 15th, I will be returning to the Laughing Skull Lounge in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm very excited about that one, so please, if you're in the Atlanta area, please come out to the Laughing Skull Lounge and check me out as I do comedy. So I had a great time performing there last time, and I'm sure that this time will be no different. Now, for any changes in my schedule, last-minute additions, or for any information about any of these shows, of where you can get tickets, website information, their Twitter handles, and all kinds of stuff, make sure you follow me on social media, and that is very easy to do. I am available on Twitter at ManScoutManning or on Instagram at ManScoutManning. If you have a question about the podcast, or if you want to become a sponsor of this podcast, make sure you email me at jake@sslshow.com, or if you want to book me for an upcoming wrestling event, make sure you email me at manscoutmanning@yahoo.com. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump into this wonderful conversation with the car chick, LeeAnn Shattuck, here on Stranger in the Southern Land. Okay, I do a big flower intro, so we can just jump right in the conversation and stuff like that. But I'll probably just introduce you because I always do, and it's LeeAnn
Shattuck.
Oh, I had it. Why did I just say it?
It's hard.
Why didn't I say it? LeeAnn Shattuck.
Yep.
Okay.
Better known as the car chick. That's why I just introduced myself as that, because My last name is too hard for people to pronounce.
Well, my actual real last name is Feuerbach.
Okay, that one's not easy either.
No, it's not. That's why I go with the surname Manning all the time.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so
But
Shattuck.
so what's your stage name? Your wrestling name?
Jake Manning.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I use as like comedy and everything else. And then, of course, I'm the Man Scout Jake Manning.
Gotcha.
So,
Do you have like one of those, because wrestlers have those, scary names, the intimidating names.
Well, see, I'm more of a comedy guy, so I don't.
Oh, you're a comedy wrestler?
Yeah, so I don't scare anybody. I just make people laugh.
Hey, most
like Card Chick sounds more intimidating than Man Scout, to be really quite honest.
Okay, you have a point there.
So you could intimidate far more people in wrestling than I can already. So just with the name of the Card Chick. So.
Good deal.
But obviously, a woman that knows about cars, So how did that all come about?
I have loved cars my whole life. My dad, while he had no mechanical skills whatsoever, was just into cars and into driving. And so he started teaching me high-performance driving when I was about 7 years old. He turned 40, had his first midlife crisis, as many of us do. And
Is that how it happens?
Yeah, it does. It's a midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis, I go immediately to cars.
Yes.
That's usually how it goes. It's younger women and cars. Obviously, he made the better option, I'm guessing.
He did.
Maybe the less expensive option in some cases.
No, not really. But I suppose it's relative. But
yeah, it's all relative.
It ended up being expensive for me in the long run because it kind of shaped my entire life. But he started teaching me the high performance driving skills when he bought his first sports car. He came home with the first generation Mazda RX-7. So he taught me the whole manual transmission and started teaching me the concepts of driving long before I was ever able to even sit in the driver's seat. And I developed a passion for driving in high performance cars from there.
Now, what age is this?
7.
At 7.
Yeah.
At 7, you're interested in cars. So.
Yep.
Was it hard to put the Barbie dolls down, or were you never interested? Like, what were the
No, I just put a supercharger on my Barbie doll's Corvette.
Okay, so you were still you had the girly things that they assigned you as a kid, but you just incorporated the cars.
Absolutely, yeah. I was very much a tomboy, but I still liked some of the girly stuff too. So it's always kind of been a balance, and that's what the Car Chick brand is about. It's about being empowered as a woman. You don't have to give up your femininity to be into guy stuff or to be into cars or to be knowledgeable about cars and make good decisions regarding them.
That's a very good mission statement. Did you have that at 7? That mission
no,
statement?
actually, that just kind of came out of my head right now. But no,
that's a very good. Put that on your business card.
At 7, it was more all about the adrenaline, and I was a daddy's girl. I was an only child, and I was definitely my father's daughter. So this was one of the things that we did to bond over the years. And I was a figure skater growing up, so. I was into sports. I played a lot of hockey, so I hung out with a lot of guys anyway in the skating world. But my dad would take me to practice, and then afterwards we would go out into the big snow-covered parking lot next to the ice rink and do donuts. And
okay, already saying
stuff.
Hockey and snow. So I'm guessing you're not from North Carolina.
No, I'm not originally. I was born in Cleveland, and then we moved to Milwaukee.
I was going to guess Michigan because of cars and stuff like that, but okay, Ohio. I could see that connection. It's close there.
Yep, Ohio and Wisconsin. So it's good growing up north because that really teaches you how to drive because you learn car control driving in the snow.
Absolutely. I grew up in Iowa. It definitely comes in handy, just even when it rains. Like people don't understand how to drive even just in the rain.
I know.
But if you've driven in the snow and understand that, it's not an issue whatsoever.
Yeah, and I had a rear-wheel drive sports car with a 60-40 weight distribution, so the back end was always just fishtailing around. And so one day my dad said, "You know what? I'm going to teach you to do donuts today because the car is going to do it anyway. You might as well learn how to control it." And, you can learn car control at, low speeds because it doesn't take, you get up to 3 miles an hour and the car's already fishtailing around and you reach those limits very quickly. So you can learn it in almost a slow motion kind of environment. Like, oh, well, if I turn the wheel a little more this way, what happens? If I hit the brakes that way, what happens? And, it's much easier to learn that car control in slow motion. And then you can build it up, and next thing you know, now you know how to control the car when the back end kicks out at 100 miles an hour.
Exactly.
So
that's an important skill for sure.
Well, in my world, it is.
Yeah. Well, even in my
fun.
world, as many miles as I put in a lot of times, especially driving in the Northeast and stuff like that, all the other people that are riding in cars with me like grew up in Georgia and South Carolina.
I'm sorry.
And they like they get freaked out when they see like snow and like just even like around town when people freak out or like, oh, there's a little bit of ice on the road and we got to stay away. Like there's only like maybe one time like I freaked out, it's not safe to drive on the road. Well, other times I'm like, oh, we could drive on the road and stuff like that. You know,
It's either that or it's the other extreme where the Southerners think, oh, well, I have an SUV, I have a 4-wheel drive, I can drive here just fine. You know, people 4-wheels slide just as effectively on ice as 2 wheels.
Exactly, and also too, like there's not the type of road care as there is in Wisconsin or Cleveland compared to here.
We didn't even have the right tires on our cars.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago when we had that, wonderful snowfall in Charlotte that we get once every 3 years and the whole city shuts down. Mm-hmm. My husband and I went over to the high school parking lot thinking, woohoo, we're going to have some fun. We took our sports cars over there and set up a nice little snow rally course in the parking lot. And we started getting ready to floor it to go flying around these cones in the snow and realized we have high-performance summer tires that are 75% worn. We went nowhere. That was the slowest rally racing you've ever seen.
Oh, so you just got stuck in a parking lot.
Pretty much, yeah. I got all the snow caked in the wheel of my car. The tires did not displace it at all. We were really like doing the slowest donuts you've ever seen. We were calling them bagels. They were so slow. But it was still fun.
Absolutely. Well, anyways, you grew up in the Midwest girl. Now, usually when people get interested in something, there's a time like in adolescence you drift away from the thing that you initially like loved. You became as an adult. Was there ever that time that you drifted away from cars and then found your way back? Was there ever like an intermediate time, or were you always interested in cars since age 7?
I think I've always been interested in cars. I did go through a phase in college of kind of shifting from sports cars to trucks.
Okay.
Because my college roommate was from a little microscopic town in Idaho, and everything was there about 4-wheel drive, going off-roading because they didn't really have any good roads. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I gained a new appreciation for this different type of vehicle and different type of driving, and spent time with her and learned how to drive over the rocks. And we were herding the cows in at night by drifting the trucks around them instead of using horses. And so I went through a truck phase and graduated from college and bought a truck, and then I got back into my sports car roots. So,
well, what type of truck did you get?
Well, right after college, I got a little more of an SUV, a 2-door Explorer, because I was traveling around a lot at that time for my job, and I needed to be able to haul stuff everywhere. But then I traded that in on a gigantic Dodge Ram 4x4 jacked up pickup truck. And I was kind of going through the phase of, I can drive over anything. Ooh, a parking space. I'll make one.
Well, you say because your job, what job were you working where you had to haul stuff? Were you a truck driver or something? A short route truck driver?
No, I'm sure I never would have passed that driving test because I'm too crazy. But no, I was doing IT consulting and just bringing my stuff with me to long-term assignments. So it's just more like pack up everything I own and go to Virginia and do a 6-month project and then pack up everything I own and go to Chicago.
Mm-hmm. So was that your idea when you went to college? I'm like, okay, maybe it's an IT person, but I'll kind of have this hobby of cars. Was that your thought process?
It was more of, my father had been in the IT world. He'd been the head of one of the big 5 consulting firms. And so I kind of grew up with that, and it was something that I knew. And it was more of, I had grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and I knew that the cars that I wanted to have were expensive. So I'm like, okay, so if I follow in Dad's footsteps and go down this career path, I know I can make the money that I need to make to support my hobby. Mm-hmm. So it was really the job being able to empower and pay for my lifestyle.
You got that job to support your car hobby.
Yeah, my car habit.
It's kind of what my father says, that he works construction to supply his farming habit.
Some people do it to supply their golf habit, their fishing habit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Only problem is my farming should be his employment, but he's getting employment to pay for his employment. That's that's what happens.
It happens.
It happens that way. So like, you worked in the IT. Like, how long did you work in IT before you started to think about like, I want something more from this hobby that I do? Like,
it was more of, being in corporate America for so long, and I was traveling a lot, and I started to kind of get to that age where I wanted to be home more and kind of settle down and not know the flight attendant better than I knew my own family. And so I switched jobs.
What about is that time in your life? Is it like early 30s?
It was kind of late 20s.
Yeah,
late 20s.
It seems like that's when it happens for like a lot of people. You feel like you're on this really clear path, and then all of a sudden you're like, you wake up one day and like, this is not where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, well, getting on a plane every Sunday night and flying somewhere and then working 80 hours during that 5-day week and then getting back on a plane Friday night and being home less than 48 hours, it's exhausting. And so I kind of realized that just wasn't going to work for me. And so I kind of took steps toward a direction I didn't even know I was going down an entrepreneurial path, but I started looking for more balance in my life and started kind of working for smaller and smaller companies. And at one point I was working for a small consulting firm, and I went into my boss's office one day and said, hey, I got to work from home on Wednesday. I've got the refrigerator guy coming, the washing machine guy coming, the cable guy coming. I've got all this stuff set up because I just bought this house. And he looked at me across his desk and said, why can't your wife handle all that? I said, TJ, do you realize what you just said to me? And I think that was the point of my aha moment when I realized, why am I working 80 hours a week to build a business for someone else who clearly can be an idiot sometimes? And, why am I doing this for someone else? If I'm going to work this hard, why don't I have a little more control over it at least and do something that I'm passionate about?
Yeah, see, we're like, you and I are of this generation of people that like this last generation where we were always told, get a good job, stand on the radar, security, where it seems like everybody, like even just a couple years younger than me, we're always told, oh, do whatever you want and like start your own businesses, do your own things, be your own entrepreneur, do what makes you happy.
Right.
Because our fathers were very much like, no, you have to get a job to be secure, and life has to be set up this way. Like I feel like you and me are in that transitional period of people that, were taught that and realized that that's not the way it has to be.
Right. I had this whole plan laid out, from day one in my life of, I was, going to get perfect grades in high school, and I was going to go to this college, and then I was going to get this type of job and, have a house by this age and these cars by this age. And it was just this plan that was laid out.
Because that's what we were told from day one.
Exactly.
And we had examples of it in front of us.
And I was miserable. I had the house and I had the cars and I was miserable. Not even the cars were able to make me happy because of everything else that was going on in my life. And I realized that I had a greater purpose, and I really needed to do something that I felt would make a meaningful impact in the world instead of just punching a clock every day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was that first step towards finding that thing that you were happy doing? Well,
I was looking at, what can I do to get out of corporate America? I was looking for that get out of jail card. I knew it wouldn't be free, but I, started looking at why do, women hate buying cars. I met a woman who had been in the automotive industry her whole life.
Well, why was that a thought in your head? Like, well, I want to solve this problem in the world.
I really, because it was, I met this person, and she had been thinking that and had come up with a business model to address this. And I had so many of my friends were always asking me when they were going out and buying cars, asking me for advice. Can you go with me? I knew that it was a problem in the marketplace and that I was considered weird as a woman who was not intimidated by it and knew all about cars. And so when I met my former business partner, she had this idea for, there's something that can be done about this. There are real estate agents that help you buy a house. Why would there not be some sort of agent type person who could help you buy a car? It's the second largest purchase that most people make.
Absolutely.
And you can get in a lot more trouble doing it.
Oh, exactly. Like,
you can't impulse buy a house. You can impulse buy a car.
Yeah, there's certain safeguards, but yeah, there's certain safeguards to a house that's going to prevent you from getting in too bad a shape.
Right.
At least now. Maybe 2000.
Maybe not some more a few years ago.
Maybe a few years ago, like 06, 07, you could get in some serious trouble. But like everything else was a little different. But like, yeah, a car, once you buy it, it depreciates as soon as you get off the lot, and you can get some serious trouble right away.
You can, and you can, if you buy the wrong car, it's not like a pair of shoes that you can take back. The buyer's remorse laws are gone in most states, so once you drive it off the lot, it's yours, done. There's not that 3-day I can take it back when I change my mind law anymore. Mm-hmm. And I see people being frustrated. I personally had experienced, when I bought my cars, the way the dealers treated me, and just as a woman. They would immediately turn to my husband and start talking to him. Excuse me, it's my car, my money. I'm buying it. I took my father test driving with me one day, not because I needed my daddy to come help me buy this car, but because this is what Dad and I did together.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily that, but like when you brought your husband along, was it a sense of like, I don't want them to, like, what was your thought process? Because obviously you know what you were doing, but you brought your husband along.
Because we were a team and we made major financial decisions together.
Yeah.
We went together to buy his cars. We went together to buy my cars.
It's just something you did.
We did together. He was into cars too.
It wasn't like you recognized, oh, this guy's going to be a dick to me.
No, not at all. It was kind of like after the fact, like, whoa, why are you not talking to me? It's clear I know what I'm doing. It's clear that I have the money, and the knowledge. Why are you not talking to me? And so, I did experience it firsthand. It didn't intimidate me or bother me the way it does a lot of people because, I've always been competitive. I've always been competing with guys because I had already started racing cars at that point. So it's like, dude, I know a lot more than you do. Let's just get this
racing
done.
Cars, like how so? Like, what do you mean, like racing cars? Were you racing Vin Diesel on the street or something? Like,
no, I will admit,
racing for pinks or something.
Growing up, we did, so we did a lot of back road racing, rally type racing. It's not a good idea. None of it was sanctioned. None of it was legal. I do not condone this, but it was just kind of one of the stupid things we did growing up because there was nothing else to do in Wisconsin. But then I got into legal forms of racing, and so.
What were the legal forms of racing?
No, I'm a road course racer primarily. I got into racing with Porsche and raced with them for many years, and now I race for an woman-owned race team out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and we do 24-hour endurance road racing. There's a team of 4 of us.
What tracks? Like, are you just
there's road tracks there's road courses all over the country. Road Atlanta, VIR, Roebling. Here near Charlotte, just if you go about an hour south of Ballantyne, there's Carolina Motorsports Park down in the beautiful booming Kershaw, South Carolina. Okay. And my favorite track is Barber Motorsports Park down in Birmingham, Alabama. It's possibly the most beautiful track ever built.
Mm-hmm. And you say 24 hours, like you driving for an entire...
There's 4 of us on the team, and so we rotate.
So it's like a little bit of relay. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, it's relay racing, but in cars.
Yes.
So every 3 hours, it's time to put in a new driver and refill the car with gas, and then jump, you're back off again. So it's a combination of driver and vehicle endurance. And balancing that against our competitive. You're not going to win the race in any one corner. It's about the longevity. In order to finish first, you first must finish. Mm-hmm. And I realized I had a big epiphany a couple of years ago and realized that running a business is a lot like racing cars. There are parallels between the two and lessons to be learned on both sides. And the big lesson that I learned was you're going to fail at least 80% of the time, often epically. But it's how you face those failures and what you do with that other 20% that's what defines you. So, just all the things that we do in endurance racing is very much like being an entrepreneur. You may not win in this corner, but you're playing the long game. What's the long-term strategy? You've got to, not make decisions with your emotions. You have to really kind of take a step back and say, what are my strategic goals? How do I make this happen? You try something and, oh, it didn't work. Okay. Everything's a test. Well, that didn't work. What's next? What else do we try? And we do that in racing. We just tried a new brand of tires that a sponsor gave us. They were terrible. We'll never use them again. Great. We learned something. Boom, we move on. But, sometimes, you're tested both on the racetrack and as an entrepreneur. And about 2 years ago, the first race I actually had with this team when I signed to them, we were down in Birmingham. And 90 minutes into the 24-hour race, our number 4 piston performs a spontaneous high-speed disassembly. And
I understood all that. I completely understand, right?
Kaboom!
That's something that could have been taken care of at Valvoline, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the number 4 piston decided to explode and blow a baseball-sized hole out the side of our engine block.
Okay, I know that's not good.
That kind of brings an abrupt end to your day. And so when we had the car hauled into our paddock, and sure enough, our crew chief finds the giganimous hole in the bottom of the engine. And, at that point, our day was done. 90 minutes into our first race, and it was over. And, we were all kind of sitting there really stunned and devastated. And then the entrepreneur brain of mine kicked in. I'm like, guys, no, we've got to figure out how to overcome this. There's got to be something that we can do? Can we weld beer cans over the hole and plug it for a while and limp this car to the end of the race? Can we get another engine and replace the engine trackside? That's not an uncommon occurrence in endurance racing. What can we do? Because we are not just going to give up and pack up all of our stuff and go home. Now, I had sponsors that had donated money, people that had contributed to be able to help me do this. It had actually bought me fireproof underwear. I was not going to tell these people that we had failed. And as an entrepreneur, you have to have that same attitude. You just can't accept failure ever. And so we went over to the junkyard and found an engine that was similar to the one that was in our car. Not quite the same, but we thought we could make it work. And we got the help of a gentleman who walks around the junkyards and helps people out. And he grabbed this giant steak knife and just started ripping hoses and wires and helped us pull the engine out of this junkyard car. We named him Steak Knife Steve. And we brought that junk engine. It was awesome.
I've never heard that nickname before.
We could never have done it without Steak Knife Steve.
Okay. I want to find a Steve and call him Steak Knife Steve.
Well, only if he pulls a giant steak knife from Outback out of his belt.
I'll give him one.
That'd be a great wrestling name.
Steak Knife Steve. I agree.
I like that.
I
want royalties if you ever give that name to somebody.
Okay. All right. I'll let you know whatever royalties would amount to in professional wrestling.
But we got that engine back and spent the rest of the time, the whole night, transplanting that engine block onto the head of our engine, because fortunately that was intact. Got everything put back together. We actually had to plug some of the holes because the engine wasn't quite the same. So we actually were plugging some extra holes with rags and zip ties and praying that the oil would stay in. And during this time, it had started raining like monsoon, pouring down the rain. So we're hovering under our tent doing this. And with about 30 minutes left in the 24-hour race, we finally got everything back together. And I suited up and got into the car. And we were trying to get it to start up. And just, it was not going to, she just didn't want to start. And so our crew chief says, we're going old school. He grabs a can of racing fuel, pours it directly into the intake, says, try it again. So I'm like...
Didn't realize that was old school.
Oh, yeah, that's old school. Just pour gas down in there and force a spark. So, of course, I hit the button, and this giant fireball erupts in the engine bay. The whole front end of the car catches fire. If it hadn't been raining, the whole tent probably would have gone up. And Scott's screaming, full throttle, full throttle. So I slammed my foot onto the gas pedal. It sucked the fire down into the engine, and the dang thing started up. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
So like, go, get out on the track. Don't worry. The rain will put the fire out. Just go.
And I thought Steak Knife Steve was the most dangerous part of this story.
No, our own crew chief was the most dangerous part of this story.
Yeah.
So here I am, pulling this, race car out onto the track that's on fire. It's pouring the rain. I can't see barely 2 feet past the front of the car. It's dark. We have no headlights, of course. And I've never driven this track before.
Oh, okay.
So a lot like running a business, you pretty much are just kind of driving blind and making it up as you go along. So I was actually reliving memories of studying YouTube videos of that track in my head and limped it around the track for 4 official laps to officially finish the race so that we could say as a team that we finished the race.
Oh, so you just had to go the 4 laps.
I just made a few. I only had to lay down 1 official lap to do it,
Okay.
but we laid down 4. So
Okay.
before the checkered flag dropped, and we were like, woo! So it was just, it was kind of a life-altering experience overcoming that and being able to say that, we succeeded, we did something completely crazy, we thought outside the box, and we made this happen, which is what you have to do in business, too.
I absolutely agree, but you're talking about racing, and you're talking about something where people can you white knuckle something, you know what I'm saying? With that type of intensity, you're going through with that. When something like a catastrophe like that happens, and then obviously you have to think very logically and think very thoughtfully, this is the best option, this is the best route to go, and we need to go like this. When you have the type of intensity where you're white knuckling something, sometimes you don't think as clearly. But obviously you guys were thinking clearly enough to do this. Obviously there's a certain amount of intensity and just do this. And sometimes you can make a really bad decision to make things worse. How do you try and stay clear-headed enough to make those good decisions with still having the intensity that you need to push forward? How do you find those balances?
And this is where endurance racing, I think, has been the best training for me for running a business because, my team owner is a process engineer at the nuclear bomb facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Okay, so this is nothing. Okay, so he's just taking it down a step. So
so Samantha is, she's very good we have our processes. And so everything we do on the team, from the way we pack up, prep the car before the race, the way we pack up the truck and the trailer, every box that every tool and part goes in and comes with us to the track, our arrival and unpacking checklist, our night before checklist, our tech checklist, our morning of checklist. She has checklists for every little stupid thing that we do. Every pit crew member has an assignment and a role and a responsibility, and we drill and we drill and we drill.
Well, that's reassuring that she's that type of individual, and she works in a nuclear
I know,
facility.
Right? I'm so glad.
I appreciate that she puts that much thought and care into things.
Now the scary part is, the guy that poured the gasoline into our race car, he works there too.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully they balance each other out.
I
hopefully,
really hope so.
Hopefully he's the check and she's the balance.
That's what I'm hoping too.
So.
But, when you have, and in business, when you have processes to operate your business for every little thing that you do, then you know what you're doing, and it eliminates the chance for things going wrong.
I absolutely agree.
Now, things are still going to go wrong because this is life or this is racing, and just random things happen because you cannot predict every molecule in the universe and what's going to happen. But when you have that foundation that creates space, mental, emotional, and logistical space for you to deal with the crap that happens. And really, I've noticed it in our race team. We have had other things go wrong, but we've had a process to handle it. And when we haven't, we've had the space to creatively think of a solution and then go back and say, okay, what do we need to add to our process to try and prevent this from happening again? And I do that in my business as well. So it's about having those processes. And even when I'm driving on the track, you talk about white knuckling. You really shouldn't be white knuckled when you're driving a race car. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think that we're adrenaline junkies, and we're actually not, because adrenaline is not your friend on the track. Adrenaline brings out the fight or flight response and the white knuckles, whereas you have to be almost in this zen kind of place so that you're calmly dealing with, the 100 other idiots that are all around you also going 100 miles an hour. And so it creates a mental discipline, and that's where I think endurance racing, because you're playing the long game, you're like, I'm not really going to race this particular idiot into this corner. If he wants to do something stupid, that's fine. And that's one of the rules on our race team. Number one, don't drive with stupid, because the race isn't going to be won in this corner, but it can be lost in this corner. So we tend to make a little more conservative decisions because we know we're playing the long game. And yet we also know when it's appropriate to take that risk. I squeezed my car in between two other cars in a corner that really doesn't have room for three cars. Because I was like, this is a calculated risk, and I need to get by this guy because he's on the same lap as we are. So you learn where to make calculated decisions. And sometimes you make the wrong one. Same thing, in business. At least in business, sometimes you make the wrong decision. And yes, it can have some pretty big financial consequences. But you suck it up and you learn from it and you move on. I've certainly made some of those decisions in my business. And in racing, sometimes it's a catastrophic decision. Sometimes it's one you can recover from. But either way, you learn from it, and, there's always the next time. As long as you don't put yourself in the wall.
No, that's a good philosophy in life and stuff like that. But, like, the way you describe, like, how you guys are checklists for racing and then you translate that into your own business, I do a very similar thing in that, for example, tonight I'm going to be taking a wrestling ring to West Virginia and setting up and tearing down a wrestling ring. And a wrestling ring is very specific. And luckily the ring that we have has the least amount of parts possible, because more parts always equals the likelihood of a part being lost. But there are still things that can happen. Ropes break, things happen, and things you can fix, things you can't fix. I have enough amount of equipment in our ring truck that if something was to happen, like or a regular problem that would happen, I can fix in a certain amount of period of time.
Well, that's why they invented duct tape and zip ties.
Exactly. Duct tape, zip ties, socket wrenches, and everything else. But, like, I have a problem with the idea of, like, something going bad. They're like, oh, I'm prepared for everything that could go bad. But the idea of, like you just said, when you said that the molecules just happen and things just happen to go wrong, I have a hard time letting go and saying, oh, things will go bad if they go bad, and we'll fix them when we get there. Like, that's obviously the attitude that you're talking about you have to have. I have a very hard time of getting to that place and coming to that realization. How is it that you come to that realization? And did you have to learn that lesson, or is that always innate?
I had to learn it.
How did you learn it?
The hard way.
Well, why didn't you tell me how you learned it the hard way? And hopefully that information will help me learn it the easy way. So,
having an epic failure in your history and kind of forcing yourself to move through that was a big turning point for me in my mindset.
Well, what was that epic failure?
That was the exploding engine and Steak Knife Steve and all that fun.
Okay,
yeah,
that was the epic.
That was, and I still struggle with it, because I'm a perfectionist, and so when things go wrong, it drives me crazy. We talked about my former life in IT. I was a project manager, so it was my job to try and plan for every possible contingency. And if something went wrong, my head was usually the one on the chopping block, and that was very, very stressful. And so, now I've learned to shift my mindset, and instead of anticipating things going wrong, I plan to try and make everything go right with the processes. Mm-hmm. And I have to force myself to kind of visualize, the outcome, and think. You really have to switch your mindset to a positive mindset and think of, focusing on the outcome that you want to have, because we do attract what we think about. So if you're always worried that something's going to go wrong, guess what? Things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
So learning to go into it with the mindset of things are going to go great. We're prepared. We've got our processes. We've got some contingency stuff here. We've got enough zip ties. Mm-hmm. If something happens, we'll figure it out. And I surround myself with people that are creative, that have good ideas, that are resourceful, and who can kind of go, all right, let's figure this out. And having the people around you with that mindset is really, really helpful.
I totally agree, because I'm surrounded by idiots.
We're always surrounded by some
degree of idiots. And people love torpedoing with negative energy.
They do, and you have to pick and choose those people. And if Samantha is, because she works at the nuclear plant, when things go wrong in her world, it's a little more severe than when things go wrong in my world or possibly in your world.
Yeah, I hope people who work at nuclear facilities have positive attitudes.
Exactly. Well, but she does tend to get a little flustered when things don't go right. Mm-hmm. This last weekend when we had our big race and we had these new tires that we were excited about, mostly because we got them for free. But, we nearly blew through the whole set of them just in 30 minutes on the test day. They really were not what we thought they were going to be, and they were all the tires we had for the weekend. So we were kind of figuring, okay, what do we do? And we just had to get creative and say, okay, I was starting to walk around to see if anybody else had tires that would fit on our car that might be willing to sell them to us. Mm-hmm. We found out that we have 2 extra wheels. We have 6 wheels for the car, so 6 tires for the 24 hours. And 2 of those wheels, because they were new, didn't fit right. So we couldn't even use those 2. So it's like, okay, how do we solve this problem? You have to think of what can we do to solve this, and focusing on finding the solution as opposed to what the problem is. And so I started walking around the paddock. Hey, does anybody have a tire mounting machine? Because I can mount these tires onto these other 2 wheels over here. And ended up, by asking for help and asking other teams, hey, do you know anybody that can mount tires? Do you know anybody who can mount tires? They're like, oh, yeah, we'll go find the tow truck guy over there. He's got a shop in town. After the race, he might be able to mount tires for you. So I go find the tow truck guy, whose name was also Steve. There's something about Steve's. They're very helpful.
Maybe Socket Wrench Steve.
Socket Wrench Steve. There we go. And he's like, yeah, sure. I'll come by your paddock after the race. We'll go to my shop. We'll mount up the tires. It's okay, no problem. We solved the problem. We prayed for a little bit of rain so that we wouldn't use up as much rubber on the tires. But as a team, we worked together to come to a solution, even though kind of the initial thing was, oh, crap, we're screwed. Mm-hmm. But you just can't let yourself stick in that mindset. There's always a solution. It just may not be readily evident to you. It may not be easy. It may not be cheap.
It's always nice to have options.
But yeah.
So sometimes, as long as there's options available. Now, one option may suck far worse than the rest.
They might.
One may be horrendous, but at least it is an option.
Exactly.
You know?
And you got to kind of keep it in perspective, too, to think, okay, if we can't come up with a solution and we have a failure here, what's really the outcome? Is somebody going to die? In Samantha's world, that may very well be the case at a nuclear plant. In the racing, it's like, okay, no, we're going to make the decision as a team. If we run out of tires, you know what? We're going to be done. We're going to come in because we're not going to put our people at risk out on the track on dangerous tires. We are not going to do it. Some other teams might, but we're not. So we knew what the consequences were of the decision that we might not finish this race. And you know what? That sucks, but it's not the end of the world. There's another race. We'll learn from this. We still had fun while we were out there. But we're going to work towards doing whatever we can to make this work. And we did.
Sometimes that is the most powerful thing you can say to yourself is like, this is not the end of the world.
Yeah, you have to sometimes you just have to be at peace with whatever the outcome is going to be. And we tell ourselves, you know what? We're not brain surgeons. We have a bad day. Nobody dies. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you just kind of have to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. And then you're like, well, if your brain, then you're like, well, what do brain surgeons say?
Yeah, I have no idea. It makes me really happy I didn't become a doctor.
Yeah, because they don't have that. You know what I'm saying? There's no back end of that. You have to come up with a solution or somebody dies.
Yeah. And I suppose they probably even have to make peace with, I can't save everyone.
Yeah, I guess everybody's got to have some sort of...
No, I'm not a brain surgeon.
I guess your friend who works in a nuclear power plant, she's like, well, I guess this whole part of the country is going to be radioactive now. I guess that would be her solution in her mind.
I have never asked. I should probably ask her that.
She would probably have the best answer or the worst answer, either or. She would... it'd be interesting to know what that would be.
Yeah.
So... Anyways, we went on this whole sidetrack of racing, which was fantastic. we were building to how you became the car chick. So
right.
You were talking about how, as a woman, that buying a car and in that market isn't as favorable or as nice of a process as it should be.
Well, it can be very frustrating, and many women feel that the dealers don't treat them with the respect that they deserve. As consumers with a lot of purchasing power, that they kind of talk down to them because they don't know as much about cars, or they don't feel that
But I as a dude don't know that much about cars.
Exactly.
You could talk down to me, somebody could talk down to me about cars. You could talk down to me about cars right now, and I would not feel bad about it at all because obviously I don't know anything.
Well, I clearly confused you with the whole piston exploding thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know hardly anything. So it'd be justified. Well, you could talk down to me about cars. Not that you should, and not that you should make me feel bad, but I'm just saying, that totally I would understand how that could happen.
Well, and there's this misconception in society that having a Y chromosome just automatically makes you knowledgeable about cars. Mm-hmm. There's nothing on the Y chromosome where car knowledge is built into the male DNA and absent from the female DNA. And furthermore, knowing about cars, you may know how to tear down an engine and totally rebuild it, like my husband does, and not know the first thing about the car buying process and that business and how that negotiating strategy works. They're two very different things. And, it's just dealerships, the whole automotive industry, like many other industries, have been male dominated, and, women have not had as much of a presence. It's increasing greatly now, and it's wonderful. We see more women taking over dealerships, inheriting them from their fathers. We see more women moving into management positions. But, the reality is it's probably always going to be a fairly male-dominated industry because the lifestyle of working at a dealership is really rough. It's long hours. It's weekend hours. It's, not conducive to a work-life balance if you want to raise a family, especially for women. But, a lot of it also is just not understanding how to effectively market and sell to women. The way you market and sell to women is different from how you market and sell to men. Our brains work differently. We have different priorities. We care about different things. And the industry is slowly trying to understand that. And I know many wonderful dealers that treat women great. But there's a stigma in the industry, they've kind of built up this reputation over the decades. And so most women, when they walk into a dealership, they walk in expecting to go to battle. They expect not to be treated well. And just the whole process, I have to remind people, dealerships are a business. They're not a charity. It is not their job to hand you a phenomenal deal on a silver platter, and it is not their job to help you make a smart financial decision. That's your job. Their job as a business is to maximize their profits for their shareholders, period. Now, that doesn't mean that they should treat you poorly, take advantage of you because of a weakness in your financial situation, but you as a consumer have to educate yourself. And so, we really looked at a model that would bridge that gap between customers and dealers. People don't like the haggling. They don't like spending all day there. They don't necessarily know the questions to ask. When looking at used cars, they don't necessarily know what to look for in a used car. What are the red flags? And because I have all that knowledge, that's kind of become my superpower, is to put together a process that makes it easy on the customer. It saves them time. It gives them the benefit of my expertise to help them navigate through the potholes along that path, and also to help the dealer have an easier and smoother transaction, and they spend less time and energy attracting and retaining that customer, and they get to sell a car they might not otherwise have sold. They may never have met that customer. So I really work to create a win-win situation between all parties and save everybody a lot of time and frustration.
Well, how do you do that with your website, and how did that come to be? Like, how did you go from, like you said, like there's real estate agents for real estate, like how do you become an agent for a car? Like what type of service, and how did that first happen? How did that business start?
Well, it was a new business model in the industry, and it's still a very unique model where most of the car buying services that have cropped up over the years, because people don't like to haggle, they've been focused on the pricing. Most of them are online only. A lot of them are actually lead generation sites for dealerships. There may be a pre-negotiated deal like you might have through your credit union or through your Costco membership. But all that is very impersonal, because the changes in the automotive industry, the price of the car that you're buying is actually the least of your problems. And it's the whole other gambit that is where people can lose money, time, and sanity. And so my service it's not online. I have a web presence so that you can learn about what I do, but my service is very, very personal. I'm more like a personal shopper for cars, because I found that the most important thing to do in making a smart car buying decision is to pick the right car in the first place. Because you can get a great deal on a crappy car, and it is not going to be a good deal in the long run. So, I love cars. I crawl through all 400 models at the car show every year. The manufacturer send me cars to test, to review. It's such a passion for me. I know the mechanical side through my husband and what he complains about when he comes home from what he had to work on that day. And so I put together a process called My Perfect Car that looks at a person's unique lifestyle, budget, and personality to help match them to the perfect car. Because I believe that cars have personalities just like people. And,
how does a personality match with somebody? Like what do you mean by personality?
Well, some people, they're very maybe environmentally conscious, and the things that are important to them are getting really good fuel economy and minimizing their greenhouse footprint. They really want to be good to the environment. They're a little more of a nature person. They like some outdoor adventure. They want to, go kayaking and hiking and camping. That's a very different person. And their needs and the type of vehicle that's going to appeal to them is going to be very different from the person who is, a high-powered attorney and needs to shuffle high-powered clients around and really impress them and, show a certain success level and appeal to, very wealthy people. That person's going to need a totally different type of car. And, the manufacturers look at it of, who is the target market for this vehicle. I see it as personalities of people being matched to the car that's going to make them happy. Because I think that as much as I love cars, and we spend so much time in our cars, you should not just have a piece of transportation with four wheels that gets you from point A to point B. You should enjoy getting in your car every day. I believe that everybody should walk up to their car every day they get into it and be like, I love my car. This car is perfect for me. It may not be your dream car because of your budget or your situation right now, but it's the perfect car for you right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely agree. But you talk about like red flags. What are some red flags do you see right away in a car? What are when you're thinking about a car for anybody, what's the first thing you look at like right away, especially a used car? What's the first thing, like, I have to make sure that this is right?
The biggest things with used cars, number one, was it a good car to start with when it was new? Because if it was a piece of junk new, it's not going to be any better used. So there are certain cars that I just blanket avoid because they're just junk to begin with. And looking at the cars that are good cars, have a good reputation for reliability, good maintenance. I look, how has this car been cared for? So many people focus very much on the Carfax report. And is the Carfax report, quote, clean? And to people that means, has it not been in an accident? Well, that's a good thing to look at, and I definitely look at that. But it's so much deeper than that. I actually look at 30 different variables on a Carfax report. I
didn't realize there were 30 different variables.
There actually are.
Okay.
And I keep finding more. But, I look at what dealership has it, because I know there are different tiers of dealerships in the industry. And, is this a good dealership? Is this a not so good dealership? Where do they get their cars? How do they recondition their cars? But, most importantly is, how well was this car cared for by its previous owners? Because, a car can look really pretty. I'll give you an example. I had a client who, her car died and her husband panicked and ran out and bought her a slightly used one. And I won't name any names, but at a very large used car national dealership chain that has a no haggling pricing model. And, the car looked beautiful. It only had 20,000 miles on it. Cosmetically, it looked brand new. But I looked and saw that it had lived in New York. And so, great, this is going to be covered in rust. And so, even though it was only 2 years old, 20,000 miles, sure enough, we got it up on a lift. And not only was the whole underside of the car rusted out, the brake lines were rusted out. It wasn't even safe to drive. It never should have even passed inspection. Had a broken bearing in the front differential. And they had spray painted over the rust to try to hide it.
Of course.
Because that's unfortunately a common practice that Southern dealers will sometimes do to hide the fact that they bought their cars up north. So you got to look at what's the history of this car, where has it lived, and how well is it cared for. You kind of got to look at a car and look at their history kind of the way you would a potential date.
You got to look under the undercarriage.
You
gotta get the guy or the girl on a lift and look underneath and take a look what's going on. You got to ask
the uncomfortable questions.
Yeah. Exactly. And then the history and where you've been, where you lived.
Has it been taken care of? Have you exercised, eaten healthy? Has the car had its oil changes? Have all the fluids been properly cared for over time? Have the tires been rotated? Did the person smoke in the car? Did they eat fast food and let their kids dump juice boxes and Cheetos in the back seat? There's a big difference between, two cars can have the same year, make, and mileage and be completely different cars.
Absolutely. So. We're running to that with our company vehicles. We had a Ford Excursion that's now logged over 300,000 miles.
Nice.
It was always there. It was reliable. We towed a ring with it, which is a very large tow, and it did for quite a considerable amount of period of time, up through mountains, down through mountains. And then we got a Ford Excursion that was maybe a year or two later, and has been nothing but issues since we got it.
And sometimes that can be due to it wasn't maintained properly in its previous life, or it just may be that particular year the manufacturer had some less than optimal construction of the vehicle. I have a feeling
that's what happened, because it was
they changed to a new engine or a new transmission.
I've got a feeling that's what's happened with that, because literally I drove it it blew a gasket.
Nice.
And we took it right to a Ford dealership to hopefully they could get it fixed, and I basically gave it last rights, and it sounds like I was correct in doing so.
You could have been fixed for the right amount of money, but is it worth putting a whole new engine in the car?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things. Back to things going wrong.
Right.
We were at a ring rental, and no lie, we pulled right into the hotel for the night, and that's when it blew, and transmission fluid leaked everywhere. But luckily, there was an Enterprise rent-a-car place, or Enterprise truck rental place, a mile and a half away, so I could get to a vehicle that could now tow the ring to the wrestling show we had later on that day, and then there was a Ford dealership 3 miles away.
And the vehicle was considerate enough to not blow until you got to the hotel. It could have blown on the road on the way there.
Exactly. And then, it blew when we got to the hotel, and then we stopped just close enough to get to places to fix every one of our issues. And if they could fix it, it worked out perfect. Is the next week we were back in that particular town that we could have just picked it up and then return the rental, take the other car, and then take it back. But
See, there's always a solution.
always a solution for sure. And you've been the solution for most people as far as like picking cars and stuff like that. So how does this knowledge you have turn into a business and the enterprise that you run today?
Well, I looked at all the different areas where, I could add value to someone, that I could make their life easier, and helping them pick the right car and saving them the research time, because we found that people spend an average of 16 weeks just researching cars before they even start the buying process and make that buying decision. The great thing about the internet is there's a ton of great information out there. And the bad thing is there's a ton of information out there. And how do you weed through that? And the market has become so much more competitive. 5-6 years ago, if you had come to me and said, I want a small fuel-efficient sedan, I said, great. Do you want the Honda or the Toyota? Now there's 5 or 6 cars in each segment that are really competitive. So it's a harder decision. And I find that people, especially women, when we are not comfortable with something, we tend to research it to death in order to arm ourselves and feel empowered with that information. But sometimes you can over-research, and I liken it to trying on too many wedding dresses. Because if you test drive too many cars, you look at too many things, after a while it all runs together, and you get this decision paralysis, which you can do in your business too. And so, I can eliminate all of that by narrowing it down very quickly, narrow it down to 2 or 3 cars. I just did an analysis for a client last night, and there's one car that's perfect for her, period. And so that's what we're going with. But if we can narrow it down to at least 2 or 3, then you set them up on test drives. They can put their butt in the seat, really test it out, decide what they want. So we look at, do we buy new? Do we buy used? Because the budget's always the most important piece. How do we finance this? What's the right solution? How do we put this financial picture together so that we're not only getting them the car that they want, but we're doing it in a way that is financially sound for them based on their horizons. And then once we make that decision, then I handle all the legwork and negotiating for them, work with the dealers to put it all together, negotiate their trade, their financing, everything. Most cases, the car ends up on their doorstep, and they just sign the papers on their kitchen counter. So they have saved, a good 30 to 40 hours of their time. And they know they got a good deal. They know they have a car that is perfect for them, that they love, and they hardly had to lift a finger to do it. So it makes it fun. I want people to be excited about buying a car. Buying a new car, even if it's only new to you, should still be one of the most exciting things that you do. It shouldn't be stressful and frustrating. It should be fun. But in order to make a good financial decision, you have to separate those emotions from the money and from the transaction. And I help them to do that. So I tell my clients, be completely excited. I want to hear you jumping up and down and yelling and screaming when the car shows up in your driveway. But know that, I have very rationally negotiated this deal for you and looked out for your interests to make sure that you're financially protected. So, hence the business model. So
there you go, and that's a service you provide, but also you're talking about your radio show, and of course, all the other things. Like what are the things that you do about getting the knowledge out there and getting yourself out there as far as being the car chick?
Well,
and branding yourself as so.
Well, it's funny because that brand kind of happened to me as opposed to me creating it. I discovered my passion for talking about cars and empowering women and getting this knowledge that I have developed out of my head. And it started out with really reaching out to the media through press releases just to try and do grassroots marketing because I didn't have an advertising budget. And I realized what I did was really unique, and you can't just put a print ad in the newspaper for what I do. I'm not a plumber. Everybody knows what a plumber does. They have no idea what I do. So, I got out there, I started speaking, and I started, doing some radio interviews, some television news interviews when things would come up, and just found that it was something that I was good at. I was passionate about talking about it, and I could do it off the cuff fairly easily. And then that kind of led to the opportunity to do a full-time radio show with America's Garage. And that kind of led me into some TV opportunities and getting to know some producers. And so now we're working on a television show called Rust Rescue, where we find classic cars, usually American muscle, but not always. We've got a 48 Buick Special right now. We find them rotting out in a field somewhere, unloved, and we bring them back to a home garage and show people how they can fix one of these classic cars up themselves on a budget of $10,000 or less. So that's a lot of fun to do. We're talking about a reality show about my business, about the car chick, but that brand, it just kind of embodies who I am and wanting to be empowering, but also a little bit silly and irreverent and snarky at the same time. And a friend of mine that I met networking just started calling me Car Chick. And, when I created the business, I didn't want to be the CEO because I had just gotten out of corporate America. And I wasn't really interested in that. So I put down Chief Car Chick. And that's still to this day what's on my articles of incorporation. And I have to sign it on all my tax returns. My accountant hates it. But way to stay low profile. But the brand kind of created itself. Mm-hmm. And so, now I'm kind of fully embracing that brand, and that's why we're going through the rebrand with the website and expanding it into what I'm calling the Car Chick Empire and building the radio and the television, and we're going to have products and a lot of more educational opportunities and seminars and speaking. So I just really want to empower people with the knowledge they need to make smart decisions about taking care of their cars and buying cars so that they're in a good financial position and their car takes care of them.
Yeah, you could build a little empire streaming site where come here every week, a weekly update. This is how you take care of your car. We're going to talk about, doing your oil changes and stuff like that.
Yep.
So there's nothing but endless opportunities for you.
Exactly.
So that's just how my brain's working right now.
It's that entrepreneurial brain. You're like, ooh, what can you do here? What can you do there?
Exactly. But as far as myself, I have no idea.
Sometimes it's hard to see it for yourself.
I see everybody else's how you could be successful. Myself, I have a hard time. But we're on the topic of success. We're getting close to the end here. And the question I ask everybody else, this is where we get to the $1 million question of the whole podcast, is the idea of success. What does that mean to you? When I say that, what's your thought process? Is there a level of success that you've got in your head? Do you feel you're successful right now? Do you feel like it's something far away? Do you think it's obtainable? When I say the word success, what are your thoughts on it?
Success for me falls into kind of two categories. If I want to look at my life as a whole and say, was I successful? If I get on my deathbed and look back on my life, two things come to mind. Number one, did I make a difference in the world? Did I help somebody else? Did I make a difference in the lives of other people and make the world a little bit a better place, even if it's just this one little microscopic corner of it? Did I have a positive impact on society? And the second is, was I able to pay for my racing? Was I able to do the things that I love to do that give me joy? Was I able to fund that through my endeavors? So a selfish thing and a not selfish thing. Okay. But I think it has to be both because it's okay to want things for yourself. It's one of the reasons we start businesses so that we can have freedoms on our own, and there's no reason you can't benefit yourself and benefit others at the same time.
Yeah, correct. All right. Now that we're coming to the end, please give everybody all the information, services. You have a free microphone to let people know how they can get in touch with you, and you can buy a car for them or shop a car for them, or they can learn some knowledge. So there's your time to drop all of that right now.
No problem. You can go to thecarchick.com. And we also have carchick-tv.com, and that's my YouTube channel where you can get some more empowering videos. We're in the process of redesigning the carchick.com website right now with my rebrand team, so everything is going to be integrated under there very soon, hopefully within the next couple of months. But you can always get in touch with me on that site and help you buy a car. If you just have any car buying questions, car maintenance questions, really anything related to cars you have a question about, if I don't know the answer, I will find a resource for you that does.
All right. Well, LeeAnn, thank you very much for taking time out of your day and talking with me. So thank you very much.
Jake. Thanks so much. And good luck with your wrestling.
I'll need it.
Well, you still need to come up with a good name for you.